This one's called An Approximate History of a Minister, and it goes a little something like this. A priest and a priest training sat in a confessional booth talking through a grate. The training priest was talking about how he felt lost. He was a square peg in a round hole. He felt down on himself. Anyone's calling in life is as a man for others, Tony, the priest said. How do you know that? It is not I who knows. It is the word of God. No, how do you know my name? You are my Sumerian, Tony. I talk to you most every day. Right. Look, Tony, mate. Especially as a priest, your purpose is to devote your time to others. Trust God to care for you. You do not have the space to think of yourself. Yes, Father, Tony said. Good. Now be a dove and go fetch the mail from the letterbox. Yes, Father. Tone left the confessional and went out to the letterbox. On the way back into the church, he flicked through the envelopes and flyers, sorting the mail from the junk. He stopped on one which, to Tony, seemed like a message from God. This diet pill discovered by Aussie mum has doctors baffled and amazed. Tony tore through the information on the flyer and discovered the diet pill coveted by the pharmaceutical industry that was so effective it could usher in a holocaust of obesity. Tony filled out the order form then and there and ran down to the post box as though the service might be shut down any second. Following his order, Tony was stifled by weeks of anticipation. He survived the torturous weeks with lengthy sculls of the communion wine and dreams of his new beach bod. Every day he waited by the mailbox. After the pills arrived, Tony's excess flab molted quickly and without effort. He pinched a tenner from the Sunday collection and used it to buy a pair of racing red Speedos from Lowe's extra small section. He wore his new simple trunks under his robes until one day he could take no more. He derobed in the middle of church and announced, "Surf's up, dudes!" before fleeing St. Patrick's and running down the beach in nothing but his cozies. He jumped waves, he built sand castles, and as the sun slowly darkened, so did his English complexion. But for all his glee, Tony couldn't shake the loneliness he felt whenever the beauties of Manly Beach would casually saunter past his castles in the sand. He craved companionship for his fragile little empires. Every day, he mustered courage to serenade a suitor. He would say charismatic things like, "I call these my Tony abs." He would gesture to his stomach. Of course it failed. A disheartened Tony decided on a more casual approach with a lifesaver. She was standing by herself after a large group of people had dispersed from around her. Her face was red, she looked alone, in need of the company of someone like Tony. "Hi, darling. What's going on?" He swooned. She looked at him for a moment before frankly saying, "A man just drowned in the water." This took Tony off guard. Talking to women was hard, Tony thought. He took a moment before offering her consolation. "Nah, it's pretty obvious that, well, sometimes shit happens, doesn't it?" "That's a horrible thing to say," she said. But Tony couldn't think of anything else to say. So instead, he just nodded and nodded. And he kept nodding until the girl walked away. Then Tony went and buried his head in the sand. He stayed with his head in the sand until a hand grabbed his neck and pulled him out. "What do you want?" Tony huffed, his face wet with salty water. "I saw that shameful display," an American accent replied. "That girl was vulnerable, needed consolation, and you couldn't even take advantage of her in that situation? You sicken me, sir." I know. I don't know how to talk to a woman," Tony whined. "I'm so ashamed." "Listen, mate, I can help you," the man said. "I know how to override a woman's rejection mechanism." Tony said he didn't understand. The man jumped back and announced, "Make any girl want to fuck in seconds with this one simple secret." Gee whiz, Tony thought. That is impressive. For nothing more than a small fee, the man offered Tony an armory of psychological weapons to use in acquiring a stock of women. All you have to do to trick any women into sleeping with you is disguise perfectly innocent sounding words in innocent conversation. I like to call it innuendo. They do it in porn all the time. Did you ever wonder how those movies always end in someone fucking? Tony was never allowed to watch pornography when he was a Sumerian, but it seemed like this man knew what women wanted. He was very glad he could learn how to trick a woman into wanting sex from a man who knew women so well. You say come, you say hard. Instead of saying passionate, you say worked up. Don't tell her she's sweaty, tell her she's wet. That'll make her wet. The man winked. Tony listened and took notes. He was sweaty. He was wet with anxiety when he approached a girl. She told him her name was Margie. He told her how wet he was. "That is the most vile thing I've ever heard," Margie said. "What?" Tony said. "It stuffed it." Tony started blabbering uncontrollably. But, the man told me to say, and I did, and you said, but, it should work, but you said vile, but. Poor Tony really couldn't talk to women. The woman just stared at him blankly. He was very nervous. He was getting wetter than he had ever been before. He kept staring over and over and saying but until she eventually broke her silence. "This is going to sound very bizarre," Margie said. "But for some inexplicable reason, I just crave your butt." That night, she had it. Margie made Tony's butt pregnant for the first time. It wasn't long before Tony realized that he was a guy with 3 not bad looking daughters. It made him understand women to the point where Tony fancied himself a bit of a feminist. However, Tony realized that, as the man, it was his duty to provide for these women. There was no time for sandcastles on the beach anymore. He had to take responsibility, so he got a job mashing a keyboard at his local national paper, The Australian. The 3 women put a lot of financial strain on the pocket. Even if his daughters all managed scholarships for their schooling, there were still many other expenses for him to worry about. Money was the reason Tony was so easily distracted from his story he was writing on Indigenous land rights. The distraction was an ad that appeared on his computer screen. "Want to make easy $$ in Australia fast?" Tony read the information and lined up the necessary interview. He went to a big white palace for that interview. He was directed to a boardroom where a group of important-looking people were standing around a table, doting on an incontinent old man who was sitting at the head of the table. The old man was spectacled, bald on top. He was wearing green and gold pajamas, and he was having a tantrum. "Eat your peas, please, John," one of the people said to the old man. "No, I will not eat my peas. My friend George says his cabinet never makes him eat his peas." "I'm sure that's not true, John. Now please eat your peas." "I will only eat my peas if you agree to give more rights to employers." "We will if you eat your peas, John. Isn't that right, Peter?" "I really don't think that's a good idea," said the man called Peter. The old man pouted and refused his spoon. "All right, fine," Peter said. "You can have work choices if you just please eat your peas, John." Tony was very confused by this whole bizarre situation. He cleared his throat to make his presence noticed. The group around the table turned to him. "Hello, my name is Tony," Tony said. "I'm responding to your ad on the internet. I would like to make $$ in Australia fast." "Thank Christ," one of them said. "I thought no one would ever respond. We're desperate." "We're not that desperate," the man called Peter said. "Oh, quit dreaming, Costello," another man said. "Please, sit down." Tony took a seat opposite the old man. The people at the table all started asking Tony a series of questions. Tony knew he was a man of limited experience, but he answered the questions as best he could. "How do you feel about devoting your life to the Australian public?" he was asked. "I was training as a priest before, which means you're a man of others, but I quit, so I don't think I'm very good at it." The people at the table all turned and nodded to each other. They asked him what they thought about boat people. "I hate boats," Tony said. "I think we should stop boats. I really prefer it when people get wet." The people at the table all started to nod again. "I like you. You're submissive. You speak the speak. You've come to a job interview in Speedos. You're clearly a hick," a man in a leather jacket said. He turned to the others smiling. "I think he's the right guy." "Don't get so cocky, Malcolm," said Peter. He turned to Tony. "What else can you offer?" "Well, I have experience working at the Australian." "So you're buddies with Rupert, eh?" Malcolm interrupted. "Settles it for me, you're in," he announced, casually throwing his hands up in the air. "Who's in?" the old man irked. "Oh, for God's sake, somebody take John for a walk," Peter snapped. A man in a black suit with sunglasses came and took the old man away. No one really noticed. They all had turned and were looking at Tony, sitting opposite the head of the table. This all made Tony very uncomfortable. He couldn't think of what to say, so he just nodded and nodded and nodded.